In July of 2009, the Grimoire of Marisa dropped, which is a pretty unique book, not just for Touhou, but in general. Rather than focusing on characterization or world building like the prior books of Bohemian Archive and Japanese Red, or Perfect Memento in strict sense, this book is solely concerned with spell cards. Nothing but bullet patterns here with Marisa's thoughts on each spell card up until that point. Grimoire of Marisa is an exploration into Danmaku, what the bullet patterns are even supposed to be designed after, and maybe even a little bit into Marisa as a character. Thank you to my supporters. If you liked the video, consider subscribing or even joining the Patreon, link on screen and in the description. If you do, you'll be thanked in the videos, be able to watch each video a week early, as well as gain access to bonus videos. As I open the Grimoire of Marisa, you might notice that I'm flipping the pages from right to left, rather than the Japanese standard of left to right. This was the first, and at the time, only Touhou book to follow the non-Japanese style of page turning. At least one other book came out in this style later, but that's for a future date. I don't know for sure why this is, but I can only make the assumption that it is because of both Marisa and the nature of the book both having Western influences. Marisa is a Western style magician. Makes sense that she'd emulate Western style of magic and magic research. That research ended up compiled in this grimoire, which the word itself has French origins. While I don't know if there's anything to confirm this, that's my best guess. If we're looking for the in-universe excuse of why this book exists, it is because Marisa is taking down notes about other people's Danmaku. She's attempting to use others' spell cards as inspiration for her own magic. Given her character, I'm sure inspiration has a loose interpretation here. But let's not fuck around here. The real reason was because Zune wanted to talk about spell cards. This whole book is Zune's commentary on spell cards, from Embodiment of Scarlet Devil through Subterranean Animism, filtered through Marisa's perspective. The majority of what you're going to find here is stuff like what Zune was thinking and what his intentions were when making each spell card. Like how Nitori's Kappa's Pororoka is designed to emulate the feeling of a flash flood, which is why the bullets on the screen flows like water and fills the screen. Think something similar to the music room commentary in the games, but in book form. Every spell card entry shares the same elements. You of course have the name of the spell card front and center. That's kind of the whole fucking point why we're here, so it'd be weird if that was absent. Below that you get the spell card's user, some brief notes on the spell card, usually the ranking on how much Marisa is considering referencing the spell card, some screenshots of the spell card from the games, Marisa's commentary, and lastly a sigil to represent each character. So let's break down each aspect of each entry one by one. Underneath the user is a little bit of notes on the spell card. These notes tend to be a little blurb describing where and when a spell card can be seen or what type of the spell card is. Looking at Hellrealm Sword 200 Yojana in 1/ for example, it says confirmed in the Netherworld theatrical type. Netherworld because that's where Yomu is usually at, and theatrical because this is a flashier type of Danmaku. There's a couple different types that I guess Zune uses to describe the various patterns, like theatrical, bug, stress, or slave types. Slave type sounds weird as shit out of context. Even in context, it can sound suspicious as fuck, and I'll get to that later. For context, it's when something other than the user is shooting bullets. Think Alice's spell cards where she has her dolls out as ads firing their bullshit too. Notes are also occasionally used for quips, like worried about the gamma rays. Underneath that is the reference ranking. This shows how much Marisa likes the spell card and is intending to use it for magical inspiration. Usually the big, flashy, high on firepower type shit gets a higher ranking. She really likes Utsuho's kit. Fucking loves it. Her spell cards fit the description of what she's looking for. Hell in Heaven Meltdown is very Master Spark-alike given how fuck off huge it is and just fills the screen, which is also Marisa's MO. The reference line is also not exclusively relegated to that and can also be used for little jokes like how the Prism Rivers are instead ranked by volume, and Raisin is ranked by the astigmatism of her spell card. The last little bit of text on each entry is Marisa's commentary on the spell card. I'll be fucking real, this shit is super dry. The driest. Bro, I'm dying of thirst over here. I'm fucking dehydrated. I've said already that this book is intended to be research notes, and while there's some personality sprinkled in there, there's simply not enough. The book is, quite frankly, too focused on spell cards. My interest with Touhou books like this, like Bohemian Archive and Japanese Red or Perfect Memento in strict sense, is the characters. I like the characters and I find them charming. Those two books are dripping with personality as it alternated between either Aya's or Aki's personal thoughts and perspective, and talking about the subject and their personality. Straight up, Perfect Memento in strict sense made me really like Aki as a character and shot her up in the favorites tier. That's how filled with personality that book is. But with Grimoire of Marisa, we're alternating between Marisa and the spell cards, which by nature makes this book at least half as charming. But as I said, this book focuses too much on spell cards and not a whole lot of characterization, even for Marisa. The most standout parts of Marisa's commentary to me, which also happens to be some of the funniest parts of this book, which was definitely not intentional, is when Marisa constantly talks about wanting more slave-type spell cards. This is gonna sound bad out of context. While I don't think I'll be able to make clones of myself like this, I still want slaves. I like to spend my life looking for slaves. I've said it many times before, but I still want slaves. Damn, sounding like an isekai protagonist with that one. There's considerably less words in Grimoire of Marisa than other Touhou books like this, since a lot of page real estate is taken up by screenshots. But even then, what words I was reading, I just wasn't finding interesting at all. Every entry is accompanied by screenshots, which depending on the complexity of the spell card can range from just a single screenshot up to 10 for Judgment Bar of the 10 Kings. These screenshots usually have Marisa as the playable character because this is Marisa's fucking book after all. Her name is in the title. But there are some entries where that's not the case. A lot of spell cards are only found in the Aya spin-off games, and in those cases then Aya is found in the screenshots. Either that or it's Marisa in a black wig, hard to tell. But that's not the only character to cameo. Because of the way Patchouli spell cards work in EOSD, Reimu is visible for the Reimu exclusive Patchouli spell cards and is also the character at risk of eating a Master Spark. Also in Marisa spell cards, Alice can be found taking on her fair share of the shmup spell cards, and Suika is up to bat in IAMP. The last aspect of these entries are the sigils next to the spell card information. Every character gets their own respective symbol representing them. Most, potentially all, but I don't know for 3 of them, are all clip art. Like, no, for real, fucking straight up clip art. Shout out to the Chinese Touhou wiki for compiling this information. This is an amazing resource for these videos. But anyway, every single one of these sigils have a link to clipart.com, all except for Reimu, Marisa, and Reisen. It's possible those aren't clip art, but I don't know for sure. Since they're all clip art and likely sourced by different artists, they really don't blend in well stylistically together. You compare Komachi's sigil, Mystia's Mei Ling's, and Chen's sigils, and they are clearly not made by the same person. Wildly differing amounts of detail. Chen's sigil though, 10 out of 10. Fucking great. But some of these sigils I don't get why they were used for their characters. Like, Sakuya's is obvious why that's hers. But Chirino's? I don't get it. Is the polygonalness supposed to represent the way water crystallizes into ice? Because if it is, then it doesn't crystallize in that pattern. Outside of screenshots, there are illustrations provided by Genji Asai and mostly by Moriki Takeshi. Genji Asai is a frequent collaborator and has also worked on other official Touhou books. They drew the cover illustration for Grimoire of Marisa, which means that Marisa is wearing blue contacts on the cover. But every other illustration is provided by Moriki Takeshi. I looked and I didn't find much by this artist. They worked on this book, and the only other thing I found by them was a Safe for Work Sakuya x Mei Ling Dojin, and that was it. It seems like they were active in 2009 and fell off the face of the earth. I'll be real, I feel like I'm getting put on a list when I'm looking at their art, especially with the Satori image. Takeshi tends to draw characters with lowly proportions. Less so with Aiden or Alice, but you look at Yomu and especially Koichi, and I do not fuck with this. I would much rather they look older. This sucks, because I do like the general action and what is being depicted in these illustrations. It is all interpretations of what the characters are doing mid-spell card. I think the lighting is pretty strong on Alice's image, and I'd never say a Moko piece looks bad. But the interpretations of what is happening in Aya's and Suika's is fun. It's just, why you gotta draw these characters like this, man? Honestly, I don't get why this book exists. I mean, I get why this book exists. Zune wanted to talk about the spell card patterns, but do it in a way that's a bit more fun. In the afterwards, he says he didn't want to do a straight strategy guide, which I think his intent is fine and all, but I don't think that spell cards translate well into a book. For one thing, one of the appeals of spell cards is actually playing them, which you can't do with a book format. But the biggest appeal to me with spell cards is how they look in motion. But you can't do that shit with just screenshots alone. So this book fundamentally doesn't work for me, and I just don't find it all entertaining. You'd have to be the biggest slut for Marisa to unconditionally love this book. But I'm not, and I think you wouldn't be missing much by skipping over Grimoire of Marisa.